The wine glasses caught the candlelight like tiny amber prisons, each one holding secrets I didn't yet know existed. I smoothed my navy dress one more time and checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. Perfect. Everything had to be perfect tonight. "Sarah, the Hendersons are here," David called from the front door, his voice carrying that particular strain that meant he was already on edge. I couldn't blame him. This dinner party had been 3 weeks in the planning, and so much depended on it going well. David's promotion to senior partner at the law firm hinged on tonight. James Henderson, the managing partner, and his wife Claire were notoriously difficult to please. They'd been married for 35 years and had built their social circle like a fortress, nearly impenetrable, with very specific requirements for entry. "Coming!" I called back, giving myself one final once-over. My blonde hair fell in perfect waves just past my shoulders. My makeup was flawless but understated, and the dress David had bought me for our anniversary last month fit like it was made for me, which, technically, it had been. I walked into our living room, our beautiful magazine-worthy living room with its cream-colored furniture and carefully curated art pieces, and felt that familiar flutter of pride mixed with anxiety. After 5 years of marriage, I still sometimes felt like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. "Sarah, you look absolutely stunning," Claire Henderson said, air-kissing both my cheeks in that way that rich women do. She was wearing what I suspected was a designer dress that cost more than my car payment, but she wore it like it was nothing special. That was old money for you, never trying too hard because they never had to. "Thank you, Claire. You look wonderful too," I replied, meaning it. Claire was one of those women who seemed to improve with age, like fine wine or expensive cheese. At 58, she had silver hair that looked intentionally gorgeous, and the kind of bone structure that suggested good breeding going back generations. James Henderson was examining our bookshelf with the intensity of a man who believed you could judge someone's entire character by their reading choices. He was tall and imposing, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of bearing that suggested he'd never been uncertain about anything in his life. "Interesting collection," he said, though his tone suggested it was anything but. "I see you have Grisham here. Legal thrillers, David?" "Sarah's actually," David said quickly, and I caught the slight edge in his voice. "She has quite the appetite for crime fiction." I forced a laugh. "Guilty pleasure, I suppose. Though I prefer psychological thrillers these days." "How interesting," Claire said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The doorbell rang again, saving me from having to explain my reading preferences to people who clearly considered them beneath notice. "That'll be Marcus and Lisa," I said, grateful for the interruption. "I'll get it." Marcus Wright had been David's best friend since law school, and Lisa was my closest friend since college. If anyone could help smooth over the evening, it would be them. Marcus had his own successful practice, and Lisa was a pediatric nurse with the kind of warm, genuine personality that put everyone at ease. I opened the door to find Lisa holding a bottle of wine and looking absolutely radiant. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant updo, and she was wearing an emerald green dress that made her eyes pop. "You look amazing," I whispered as I hugged her. "So do you." "Is the dragon lady here yet?" she whispered back, and I had to stifle a giggle. "Lisa, be nice." "And yes, they're both here." Marcus appeared behind her, straightening his tie. "Ready to charm the pants off the managing partner's wife?" he asked with a grin. "Language," Lisa swatted him playfully. "We're going to be perfect dinner guests." If only I'd known then how dramatically that evening would deviate from perfect. The first hour went smoothly enough. We made small talk about the weather, the local art scene, and James's recent golf trip to Scotland. Claire complimented our house, though I detected a note of surprise in her voice, as if she hadn't expected us to have such good taste. David was in his element, discussing recent cases and legal precedents with the kind of passion that made me fall in love with him in the first place. He had this way of becoming completely animated when he talked about the law, his whole face lighting up with intelligence and enthusiasm. Lisa, bless her, was doing her part beautifully, asking Claire about her charity work and expressing genuine interest in the hospital foundation she chaired. Marcus was keeping James entertained with stories from their shared alma mater. Everything was going exactly according to plan. I was in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on the main course when Lisa joined me. "How do you think it's going?" I asked, checking the tenderness of the beef Wellington. "I think you're overthinking it," she said, opening the wine to let it breathe. "They seem to like you. Claire was just telling me how impressed she is with the house." "Really?" I felt a surge of relief. I was worried the art might be too modern for their taste. "Are you kidding? That piece in the dining room is gorgeous. Where did you find it?" I hesitated for just a moment. "David picked it out. He has a good eye." It wasn't exactly a lie. David had been there when I'd bought it. But the truth was more complicated, and tonight wasn't the time for complications. "Well, he certainly chose well with you too," Lisa said with a warm smile. "You two are so perfect together, it's almost sickening." I laughed, but something in her tone made me look at her more closely. There was something in her expression, just for a moment, that I couldn't quite read. "Lisa, everything okay?" "Of course," she said quickly, but she was suddenly very interested in the wine label, just thinking about how lucky we all are. Good friends, good marriages, good lives. Before I could ask what she meant by that, David appeared in the doorway. "How are my two favorite women doing?" he asked, sliding his arms around my waist from behind. "Your wife is a culinary genius," Lisa said, and whatever strange moment we'd just shared seemed to pass. "This smells incredible." "She is pretty amazing," David agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "Ready to eat? James is getting restless." Dinner was a triumph. The beef Wellington was perfectly cooked, the sides were flawless, and the wine pairings were spot on. James actually complimented the meal, and Claire asked for my recipe for the chocolate tart. The conversation flowed easily from food to travel to books. I found myself relaxing for the first time all evening, laughing at Marcus's impression of their law school professor and sharing stories about my work at the marketing firm. It wasn't until we were lingering over coffee and dessert that things began to shift. "So Sarah," Claire said, setting down her wine glass with the kind of precision that suggested she was choosing her words carefully, "David mentioned you grew up in Denver. What brought you to Boston?" It was a perfectly reasonable question, but something about the way she asked it made my stomach tighten slightly. "College, originally," I said. "I went to Northeastern for marketing, fell in love with the city and decided to stay." "And your family? Are they still in Denver?" David's hand found mine under the table, a gentle squeeze of support. He knew this was always a difficult topic for me. "My parents died in a car accident when I was 19, I said simply. "So it's just me now." "Oh, my dear, I'm so sorry," Claire said, and for the first time that evening, her sympathy seemed completely genuine. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was, but I've built a good life here." "Good friends." I looked at Lisa, who smiled warmly back at me. "A wonderful husband. Sometimes families are the ones we choose, you know." "Absolutely," James said firmly. "David's been like a son to us for years. We're delighted to see him so happy." I felt a warm glow at that. David had mentioned that the Hendersons were like surrogate parents to him, but to hear them say it meant more than I could express. "Sarah's been amazing for David," Marcus chimed in. "I've never seen him so settled and content." "It's mutual," I said, squeezing David's hand. "He saved me in more ways than one." "How romantic," Claire said with a genuine smile. "How did you two meet?" This was safer ground. Our meeting story was sweet and uncomplicated. "At a coffee shop," David said, taking over the story as he always did. "Sarah was sitting at my usual table, completely absorbed in a book. I was going to ask her to move, but then I saw what she was reading. In cold blood, I finished. He said any woman who read Truman Capote for fun was worth talking to. Best pickup line I ever used," David grinned. "Was that your first date then?" Claire asked. "Oh no," I laughed. "It took him 3 weeks to actually ask me out. He kept showing up at the coffee shop and making small talk about books." I was nervous. David admitted. Sarah was clearly out of my league. That's sweet, Lisa said, though again, something in her tone seemed off. Love at first sight. David and I exchanged a look. It was a question we'd been asked dozens of times, and we'd never quite agreed on the answer. For me, yes, David said without hesitation. I knew from that first conversation that Sarah was special. It took me a little longer, I admitted, but once I fell hard. And the rest is history, Marcus said, raising his glass. To David and Sarah, we all drank, and I felt that warm glow again. This was exactly the kind of evening David had hoped for. The Hendersons clearly approved of me, the conversation was flowing, and everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time. If only I'd known that in less than an hour, everything would fall apart. We moved to the living room for after-dinner drinks. David opened the good scotch for the men, while Claire, Lisa and I settled with wine. The conversation had shifted to lighter topics, upcoming vacations, recent movies, local restaurants. I was feeling more relaxed than I had all evening when Claire excused herself to use the restroom. A few minutes later, I realized I should probably check on her. Our upstairs bathroom could be tricky to find. I found her coming out of David's study, looking slightly startled. "Oh, I'm sorry, I got turned around," she said quickly. "I was looking for the bathroom." "It's just down the hall," I said, gesturing. "The door with the frosted glass." "Thank you, dear. Your home is lovely." David's study is quite impressive. All those law books and awards. "He works very hard," I said, though something about her tone made me uneasy. "Are you finding everything okay?" "Oh yes, perfectly fine. She gestured toward the bathroom and disappeared. I stood there for a moment, trying to shake off the strange feeling that she'd been looking for more than just the bathroom. But that was ridiculous. What would Claire Henderson possibly want to snoop around our house for? When we returned downstairs, I noticed that the atmosphere had shifted slightly. James and David were deep in conversation about a recent Supreme Court case, but there was an intensity to it that hadn't been there before. Marcus looked uncomfortable, and Lisa was staring into her wine glass like it held the secrets of the universe. "Everything all right?" I asked as I sat back down. "Fine," Lisa said quickly. "Just thinking about work tomorrow." But something was definitely off. There was a tension in the room that hadn't been there when I'd gone upstairs, like everyone was suddenly walking on eggshells. The conversation limped along for another 20 minutes before James announced that they should probably head home. "Early morning tomorrow," he said, standing and straightening his jacket. "Thank you for a wonderful evening, Sarah. The meal was exceptional." "Thank you so much for coming," I said, standing to see them out. "I hope we can do this again soon." Claire hugged me goodbye, but there was something different about it, a stiffness that hadn't been there earlier. "We'll be in touch," she said, but her smile seemed forced. After they left, Marcus and Lisa lingered for a few more minutes, but they seemed eager to leave as well. "Great dinner party," Marcus said, but he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "Really well done." Lisa hugged me goodbye, and for a moment she held on a little longer than usual. "I love you, you know that, right?" she whispered in my ear. "Of course I do. I love you too. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I'll call you tomorrow." After they left, I started clearing up while David locked the front door. "Well, that went well, don't you think?" I said, stacking plates in the dishwasher. David didn't answer immediately, and when I looked up, he was standing in the doorway with an expression I'd never seen before. "David, what's wrong? We need to talk," he said quietly. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. In 5 years of marriage, David had never said those words to me. Never. About what? Did something happen with the Hendersons? I thought everything went really well. "Sit down, Sarah." I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands suddenly shaking. "You're scaring me." David sat across from me, and I could see him struggling with whatever he was about to say. "James pulled me aside tonight. He said Claire found something in my study." My mouth went dry. "Found what?" "A photograph in one of my law books." I knew immediately what photograph he was talking about. There was only one photo I'd hidden in David's study, only one secret I'd thought was safely buried. "David, I can explain." "Can you?" His voice was stranger than I'd ever heard it. Can you explain why there's a photograph of you and another man hidden in my copy of Criminal Law Review? A photograph where you're wearing a wedding dress and he's wearing a tuxedo. The room seemed to spin around me. After 5 years, I'd thought that photograph was safely hidden. I'd forgotten it was even there. David, please, let me explain. Were you married before Sarah? Before me? The question hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. I looked at my husband, my sweet, trusting, honest husband, and realized that the life I'd built with him was about to come crashing down. Because the truth was so much worse than a previous marriage. The truth was so much worse than he could possibly imagine. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. David's eyes, those warm brown eyes that had looked at me with such love for 5 years, were now filled with something I'd never seen before. Suspicion, hurt, and underneath it all, a growing coldness that made my chest tighten with panic. Sarah, his voice was carefully controlled, the way it got when he was cross-examining a witness. I asked you a question. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. How do you explain something you've spent years successfully hiding? How do you tell the man you love that your entire relationship is built on a lie so fundamental that it changes everything? Yes, I whispered finally. I was married before. David leaned back in his chair as if I'd slapped him. For how long? 2 years. 2 years. He repeated it like he was trying to make sense of a foreign language. You were married for 2 years, and in 5 years together, you never thought to mention it? David, please, it's not what you think. What I think. His voice was rising now, the careful control beginning to crack. What I think is that my wife has been lying to me about something pretty fundamental for our entire relationship. What I think is that I don't know you at all. You do know me, I said desperately. David, you know me better than anyone. Do I? He stood up abruptly, beginning to pace. Because the woman I married doesn't lie. The woman I married doesn't hide things. The woman I married doesn't keep photographs of her secret first husband hidden in my law books. He's not. I started, then stopped. How could I possibly explain that the man in the photograph wasn't my first husband? That would only lead to more questions I couldn't answer. He's not what, Sarah? It's complicated. Complicated. David laughed, but there was no humor in it. Everything is complicated when you've been lying for 5 years. I watched him pace, this man I loved more than anything, and felt something breaking inside my chest. David was the best thing that had ever happened to me. He was kind and honest and generous, and he'd given me a life I'd never dreamed possible. A beautiful home, financial security, respectability, but more than that, he'd given me love. Real, genuine, unconditional love, and I was about to lose it all. Tell me about him, David said, stopping his pacing and fixing me with that lawyer stare. Tell me about your first husband. I closed my eyes, trying to think of a way to explain without revealing everything. But how do you tell half a truth when the whole truth is so damning? His name was Michael, I said finally. Michael what? Thompson. Michael Thompson. And when were you married? I was 21. We divorced when I was 23. Why didn't you tell me? I looked up at him, this good man who deserved so much better than the complicated mess I'd brought into his life. Because I was ashamed, I said, and that part was true at least. It was a mistake, David, a terrible mistake that I wanted to forget. Ashamed of being divorced? Sarah, it's 2019. Half the people we know are divorced. It wasn't just that it was a divorce. It was the circumstances, the way it ended. I didn't want you to know about that part of my life. David sat back down, and for a moment his expression softened slightly. What circumstances? What happened? This was it. This was where I could either tell him the truth and watch our marriage implode, or I could lie again and hope that somehow I could keep this contained. I chose the lie. He cheated on me, I said. Multiple times, with multiple women. The divorce was messy, ugly. I just wanted to put it behind me and move on. It wasn't entirely untrue. Michael had cheated, but that was the least of what he'd done. David's expression did soften then, and he reached across the table to take my hand. Sarah, honey, why didn't you just tell me that? Being the victim of infidelity isn't something to be ashamed of. I know that now, but at the time, I felt so stupid, so naive. I trusted him completely and he made a fool of me. When I met you, I just wanted a fresh start. I didn't want to be the pathetic divorcee with trust issues. David squeezed my hand. You're not pathetic, and you don't have trust issues. We have a wonderful marriage. I know. That's why I didn't want to ruin it with ancient history. Sarah, nothing about your past could ruin what we have. I love you. I love you no matter what. I felt tears prick my eyes, both from relief and from guilt. He was being so understanding, so loving, and I was still lying to him. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, I said. I should have been honest from the beginning. Yes, you should have, but I understand why you weren't. He lifted my hand to his lips and kissed it gently. No more secrets, okay? Promise me. I promise, I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. We went to bed that night with the crisis seemingly averted. David held me close, whispering apologies for getting so upset and reassurances that he loved me no matter what. I lay awake long after he fell asleep, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince myself that everything was going to be okay. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The next morning, David left for work early, kissing me goodbye and telling me he loved me like he always did. I tried to convince myself that we'd weathered the storm, that my secret was safe. I was wrong. I was at my desk at the marketing firm, trying to focus on a campaign for a local restaurant chain, when my phone rang. Lisa's name flashed on the screen. Hey, I answered. How are you feeling after last night? You seemed a little off. Sarah, we need to talk. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. Okay, what about? Not over the phone. Can you meet me for lunch? Lisa, you're scaring me. What's going on? Just meet me at Cafe Luna at noon, please. She hung up before I could ask any more questions. I spent the rest of the morning in a state of growing anxiety. Lisa had been acting strange the night before, and now she wanted to meet to talk about something she couldn't discuss over the phone. My mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. I arrived at Cafe Luna 15 minutes early and chose a corner booth where we could talk privately. Lisa arrived exactly at noon, looking like she hadn't slept much the night before. Thanks for meeting me, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Of course. Lisa, what's going on? You look terrible. She laughed humorlessly. I feel terrible. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. Is there something about your past that David doesn't know? Something important? My blood turned to ice. Why would you ask me that? Because Marcus told me what happened last night. About the photograph Claire found. About you being married before. Oh. I felt a mixture of relief and concern. Relief that it was just about the divorce. Concern about how much Marcus knew. Sarah, I've been your best friend for 15 years. I was there through college, through your early 20s, through everything, and I don't remember you ever being married. The bottom dropped out of my world. What do you mean? I said weakly. I mean, I was there, Sarah. I was there when you graduated college. I was there when you started your first job. I was there through every relationship you had in your 20s, and none of them was a marriage. I stared at her, my mind racing. Lisa was right, of course. She'd been my roommate in college, my maid of honor at my wedding to David, my closest friend through everything. If anyone would know about a previous marriage, it would be her. So I'm going to ask you again, Lisa continued, her voice gentle but firm. What is there about your past that David doesn't know? I looked at my best friend, this woman who knew me better than anyone except David, and realized I was trapped. I could lie to David because he'd never known me before Boston. But I couldn't lie to Lisa. She'd been there for all of it. Lisa, I whispered, if I tell you, you have to promise me you won't tell David. Sarah, what did you do? Promise me. She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. I promise, she said finally, but only if it's not something that could hurt David. That was the problem. It was exactly something that could hurt David, something that could destroy him. The man in the photograph, I said slowly, wasn't my husband. Then who was he? I took a deep breath and prepared to tell someone the truth for the first time in 5 years. He was my Mark. Your what? Lisa, before I met David, I wasn't a good person. I did things I'm not proud of, things I can never take back. What kind of things? I looked around the cafe, making sure no one was close enough to overhear us. I was a con artist, Lisa. I ran long cons on wealthy men. I would make them fall in love with me, marry them, and then disappear with their money. Lisa stared at me like I just told her I was an alien. You're joking. I'm not joking. Sarah, that's not possible. I knew you in college. You were studying marketing. You were normal. I was studying marketing because I was good at reading people and manipulating them. And I started running small cons in college. Nothing serious, just getting guys to pay for expensive dinners or buy me things. But after graduation, when I couldn't find a good job, I met someone who taught me how to run bigger cons. Someone who taught you? Lisa's voice was barely above a whisper. His name was Victor. He was very good at what he did, and he saw potential in me. Potential for what? For separating lonely, wealthy men from their money. Lisa was shaking her head slowly, like she was trying to wake up from a bad dream. This can't be real. Sarah, I've known you for 15 years. You're not a criminal. I was. For 3 years, I was exactly that. I would research wealthy men, recent divorcees, widowers, men who were vulnerable and looking for love. I would engineer meetings with them, make them fall in love with me, marry them, and then disappear with everything I could get my hands on. How many times? Michael Thompson was my third mark. I married him, gained access to his accounts, and then disappeared with almost everything he had. Lisa was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. You stole from him? You ruined his life? Yes. And the others? Robert Chen in Seattle, David Martinez in Phoenix. Both of them lost everything. My God, Sarah. What happened to them? I don't know. I never looked back. That was Victor's rule. Once you're done with a mark, you disappear completely. No contact, no checking up, nothing. Lisa was quiet for so long that I began to wonder if she was going to get up and walk out. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. And David? Is David just another mark? No, I said quickly, perhaps too quickly. No, Lisa, David is different. What David and I have is real. How can you say that? How can anything be real when your entire life is built on lies? Because I love him. I love him more than I've ever loved anyone or anything. When I met David, I was planning to retire. I had enough money saved up to disappear and start over somewhere else with a completely clean slate. But then I fell in love with him, and I couldn't go through with it. So you just stopped? Just like that? It wasn't easy. Victor wasn't happy about it. He said I was making a mistake, that feelings would only get me caught, but I didn't care. I wanted a real life with David. Does David know any of this? Of course not. How could I tell him? Hi, honey, I love you, but just so you know, I used to be a con artist who specialized in destroying men exactly like you. He would leave me in a heartbeat. Maybe he should. The words hit me like a physical blow. Lisa, Sarah, do you understand what you're telling me? You're a criminal. You've ruined people's lives, and now you're lying to a good man who loves you and trusts you completely. I know how it sounds. Do you? Because it sounds like you found another mark, except this time you decided to play the long game. That's not what this is. I love David. You say you love him, but you're still lying to him every single day. He thinks he married an orphaned marketing executive from Denver. Instead, he married a con artist who's stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from other men. I felt tears starting to fall. I know I've done terrible things, but I'm not that person anymore. I haven't run a con in 5 years. I have a legitimate job. I pay taxes. I'm a good wife to David. I've changed. Have you? Or are you just running a different kind of con? This isn't a con. I'm not after David's money. Aren't you? You live in a beautiful house that he pays for. You drive a car he bought. You wear clothes and jewelry he bought. How's that different from what you did to the others? Because I'm not going to disappear. I'm not going to steal from him and leave him with nothing. I want to spend the rest of my life with him. And what about the men you did leave with nothing? What about their lives? I didn't have an answer for that. How could I? There was no excuse for what I'd done, no justification that made it okay. I can't change the past, I said finally, but I can try to be a better person going forward. By lying to your husband every day? By loving him, by being the wife he deserves, even if I'm not the woman he thinks he married. Lisa was quiet again, staring into her coffee cup. The photograph, she said finally. Where was it taken? Las Vegas, at one of those cheesy wedding chapels. We had a fake ceremony as part of the con. It made him think we were really married while I worked on getting access to his accounts. And you kept the photograph? I kept a lot of things I shouldn't have. Souvenirs, I guess, reminders of who I used to be. And David found it. Claire Henderson found it. She was snooping around David's study and found it hidden in one of his law books. What did you tell him? That Michael was my first husband. That we divorced because he cheated on me. More lies. What choice did I have? I can't tell him the truth, Lisa. It would destroy him. And what about me? What am I supposed to do with this information? I reached across the table and grabbed her hand. You promised you wouldn't tell him. I promised I wouldn't tell him if it wasn't something that could hurt him. But Sarah, this could destroy him. If he ever finds out, he won't find out. Not unless you tell him. What if someone else figures it out? What if one of your victims comes looking for you? That won't happen. It's been 5 years. If they were going to find me, they would have by now. You don't know that. Lisa, please, I'm begging you. I know I've done terrible things, but I love David. And he loves me. What we have is real, even if it's built on lies. Please don't destroy that. Lisa pulled her hand away from mine. I need time to think about this, she said finally. What's there to think about? You promised. I promised without knowing what I was promising to keep secret. Sarah, you're asking me to help you lie to one of my closest friends. You're asking me to be complicit in a fraud. I'm asking you to let me have the life I've built, the life I've earned by changing who I am. Have you changed, or are you just better at hiding what you are? The question hung in the air between us as Lisa stood up. I need some time, she said again. Don't contact me for a few days. I need to figure out what to do. She left me sitting in the cafe, feeling like my world was crumbling around me. The secret I'd kept for 5 years was finally out, and now my closest friend was going to decide whether my marriage survived. That evening, David came home with flowers and a bottle of wine. Peace offering, he said, kissing me softly. I'm sorry I reacted so strongly last night. I understand why you didn't tell me about your first marriage. You don't have anything to apologize for, I said, accepting the flowers and trying to smile. I should have been honest with you from the beginning. Well, we're past that now. No more secrets, right? Right, I said, adding another lie to the mountain I'd already built. We had a quiet dinner, and David seemed completely back to normal. He told me about his day, asked about mine, and made plans for the weekend. Everything was exactly as it had been before last night's discovery. Except now Lisa knew the truth, and I had no idea what she was going to do with it. As we got ready for bed, David pulled me into his arms. I love you, Sarah, he said, looking into my eyes with complete trust and adoration. I don't care about your past. I only care about our future. I love you too, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to David's peaceful breathing beside me, I couldn't stop thinking about what Lisa had asked me. Had I really changed? Or was I just running a different kind of con? And if David ever found out the truth, would he see our marriage as the love story I believed it to be, or as the ultimate long con? The photograph was still hidden in David's study, but now there were people who knew what it really meant. People who could connect Sarah Whitmore, respectable marketing executive and devoted wife, to the woman who had once destroyed lives for money. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but all I could think about was how quickly everything could fall apart, how quickly the life I'd built could become nothing more than another crime to answer for. 3 days passed without a word from Lisa. 3 days of watching David go about his normal routine, completely unaware that our marriage was hanging by a thread. 3 days of jumping every time my phone rang. Terrified it would be Lisa calling to tell me she'd decided to reveal everything. On Thursday morning, David left for work with his usual kiss and I love you, and I tried to pretend everything was normal. I went to the office, attended meetings, worked on campaigns, and smiled at all the right moments. But inside I was dying a slow death of anxiety. That's when Marcus called. "Sarah, it's Marcus. We need to talk." My blood turned to ice. "About what?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me at my office? It's important." "Marcus, what's going on?" "Just, can you come? Please." I told my boss I had a family emergency and drove to Marcus's law office in downtown Boston. His receptionist showed me into his private office, where Marcus was standing by the window, looking out at the city with his hands clasped behind his back. "Close the door," he said without turning around. I closed the door and stood there waiting. When he finally turned to face me, his expression was grim. "Lisa told me," he said simply. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank into the chair across from his desk, feeling like all the air had been sucked out of the room. "She told you what exactly?" "Everything. About what you used to do. About the men you hurt." I closed my eyes. "She promised she wouldn't tell anyone. She promised she wouldn't tell David. She didn't promise she wouldn't tell me." Marcus sat down behind his desk, studying me like I was a stranger. "Is it true, Sarah? All of it?" "Yes." "Jesus Christ." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Do you have any idea what this means?" "I know exactly what it means. It means my marriage is over. Your marriage might be the least of your problems. Sarah, what you did, those are serious crimes. Federal crimes, wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering. The statute of limitations depends on the specific crimes and how much money was involved. And if you crossed state lines, which it sounds like you did, we're talking federal charges with longer limitations periods." I felt sick. In the 5 years since I'd stopped running cons, I'd managed to convince myself that I was safe from legal consequences. I'd told myself that enough time had passed, that I was protected. "How much money are we talking about?" Marcus asked. "Total? About 800,000. Marcus whistled low. 800,000. Jesus, Sarah. I know how bad it sounds. Do you? Because it sounds like you systematically defrauded multiple victims out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. It sounds like you're a career criminal who's been lying to my best friend for 5 years. I'm not that person anymore, aren't you? You're still lying. You're still deceiving someone who loves and trusts you. How is that different?" It was the same question Lisa had asked, and I still didn't have a good answer. Because I love David. What I did before was about money. What I have with David is about love. But you're still taking his money, aren't you? You're still living off his success, sleeping in his bed, spending his money. What makes this different from the others? Because I'm not going to leave him. I'm not going to take everything and disappear. But you took from him already, didn't you? His trust, his honesty, his right to make an informed decision about who he married. You stole those things just as surely as you stole money from the others. I started crying then, ugly sobs that shook my whole body, because Marcus was right. I had stolen from David. Maybe not his money, but something just as valuable. "What am I supposed to do?" I whispered. "If I tell him, he'll leave me. If I don't tell him and he finds out anyway, he'll leave me. Either way, I lose the only good thing I've ever had in my life." Maybe you should have thought about that before you built a relationship on lies. I tried to stop. When I met David, I tried to walk away, but I fell in love with him and I couldn't go through with leaving. So you decided to have your cake and eat it too. You got to keep the money you stole and the love you didn't deserve. "I deserve David's love," I said fiercely. "Maybe I didn't deserve it at first, but I've earned it. I've been a good wife to him. I've made him happy. Built on a foundation of lies. Built on love. Real love. Whatever else I've done, what David and I have is real." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying me. "Lisa's struggling with what to do," he said finally. "She loves you, but she also cares about David, and she's horrified by what you told her. She promised she wouldn't tell him. And she's trying to keep that promise. But Sarah, this is eating her alive. She feels like she's betraying David by keeping your secret. What would you do if you were in her position? Marcus was quiet for so long that I thought he wasn't going to answer. I don't know, he said finally. David's my best friend. He deserves to know who he married, but telling him would destroy him. Then don't tell him, please, Marcus, I'm begging you. It's not just about telling him or not telling him anymore, Sarah. This secret is out now, and secrets like this, they have a way of surfacing. What do you mean? I mean that now that Lisa and I know, other people might figure it out too. The Hendersons, for instance. Claire was asking a lot of questions the other night after she found that photograph. My stomach clenched. What kind of questions? About your background, your family, your past. She seemed suspicious. Suspicious of what? I don't know. But Claire Henderson is a very smart woman, and she has resources. If she decides to dig into your past, the implication hung in the air between us. Claire Henderson was wealthy, well-connected, and married to one of the most powerful lawyers in Boston. If she wanted to investigate my background, she certainly had the means to do it. What are you saying? I'm saying that you might want to consider getting ahead of this, telling David yourself before someone else does. I can't do that. He'll leave me. He might leave you anyway if he finds out from someone else. But at least if you tell him yourself, you control the narrative. You can explain, apologize, try to make him understand. Understand what? That I'm a criminal who's been lying to him for 5 years? There's no way to make that understandable. Marcus stood up and walked to the window again. There's something else, he said quietly. What? Lisa did some research after you told her. About your victims. I felt like I was going to throw up. What kind of research? She looked up the names you gave her, Robert Chen and David Martinez. And? Marcus turned to face me, and his expression was grim. David Martinez committed suicide, Sarah. 6 months after you disappeared with his money. The world went silent. I could see Marcus's lips moving, but I couldn't hear what he was saying over the roaring in my ears. David Martinez was dead. Dead because of what I'd done to him. Sarah, are you okay? I wasn't okay. I would never be okay again. A man was dead because of me. How? I whispered. He lost his house, his business, everything, fell into a deep depression. His family found him in his garage with the car running. I bent over and vomited into Marcus's trash can. He had 2 kids, Marcus continued relentlessly. Twin daughters. They were 8 years old when their father killed himself. Stop, I whispered. They're 13 now, living with their grandmother because their mother couldn't handle raising them alone after David died. Please stop. And Robert Chen, he's in a care facility, had a stroke brought on by the stress of losing everything. He can't speak anymore, can barely recognize his own family. I was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. 2 lives destroyed, a man dead, another one broken, children left without a father. I didn't know, I whispered. I never looked back. I didn't know what happened to them. Does it matter? Would it have changed anything if you had known? I didn't answer because I couldn't. What could I say? That I was sorry, that I regretted what I'd done. Words seemed so inadequate in the face of such devastation. This is who you really are, Sarah, Marcus said, his voice gentler now, but no less firm. This is what you did, and David deserves to know that the woman he married is responsible for a man's death. I can't tell him that. I can't tell anyone that. Then you'll live with it. But you need to understand that this secret is bigger than just you and David now. There are real victims out there, real consequences to what you did, and eventually that's going to catch up with you. I sat in Marcus's office for another hour, crying and trying to process what he'd told me. When I finally felt composed enough to drive, I went home and sat in my car in the driveway, staring at the house David and I shared, our beautiful house with its perfect landscaping and expensive furniture. Our life together, built on love but funded by blood money. Money I'd stolen from men who trusted me, one of whom was now dead because of what I'd done. How could I go inside and pretend to be the woman David thought he'd married? How could I kiss him hello and ask about his day, knowing what I knew about myself? But what choice did I have? I couldn't undo what I'd done. I couldn't bring David Martinez back to life or give Robert Chen his health back. All I could do was try to be worthy of the love David gave me, even though I'd never truly earned it. I went inside and started dinner, trying to act normal. When David came home, he kissed me hello and told me about his day, just like always. We ate dinner and watched Netflix and went to bed, just like always. But everything had changed, because now I knew the true cost of the life I'd built, and I wasn't sure I could live with that knowledge. The next morning, everything fell apart. I was at work when my assistant buzzed me. "Sarah, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's about your husband." My blood turned to ice. "Send her in." The woman who walked into my office was in her 50s, well-dressed but tired-looking. She had the kind of face that had once been beautiful, but was now marked by grief and hardship. "Ms. Whitmore, my name is Elena Martinez." I knew immediately who she was, even before she said the words that destroyed my world. "I'm David Martinez's widow, and I know exactly what you did to my husband." Elena Martinez sat across from my desk like an avenging angel, her dark eyes filled with a pain so deep it took my breath away. She was smaller than I'd expected, delicate-looking, but there was a strength in her bearing that spoke of someone who had survived the unthinkable. "You're surprised to see me," she said, her voice carefully controlled. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't even breathe properly. David Martinez's widow was sitting in my office, and somehow she knew who I was. "How did you find me?" I whispered. "It wasn't easy. You covered your tracks well. New name, new city, new life." She opened her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "But you made one mistake." She slid a photograph across my desk. It was the same photograph Claire Henderson had found in David's study, me and Michael Thompson at our fake wedding in Las Vegas. "Where did you get this?" "A private investigator. I've been looking for you for 5 years, Ms. Whitmore. Or should I say, Ms. Rodriguez?" My maiden name. She knew my real name. 5 years ago, my husband came home from a business trip and told me he'd met someone special. A beautiful young woman named Jennifer, who was going through a difficult divorce. Elena's voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. He was so excited, so hopeful. He'd been lonely since our divorce, and he thought he'd finally found someone to love again. "Mrs. Martinez, don't." Her voice cut through my attempted interruption like a blade. "Don't you dare speak. You've done enough talking to last a lifetime." I closed my mouth and waited. "For 6 months, I watched my ex-husband fall in love with you. Even though we were divorced, we stayed close for the girls. He was happier than I'd seen him in years. He talked about you constantly, how smart you were, how kind, how you understood him like no one else ever had. Each word was like a knife to my chest. He married you in Vegas, called me afterwards, drunk on happiness and champagne, said he'd never felt so lucky in his life." I remembered that call. Michael, David Martinez, had been so happy, so grateful that I'd said yes to his proposal. He'd told me he loved me dozens of times that night, and I'd said it back, knowing it was all a lie. 2 weeks later, he called me again. This time he was crying. "You were gone. The bank accounts were empty. The credit cards were maxed out. Everything was gone. Mrs. Martinez, please." I said, "Don't speak." Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. He lost everything. The house, the business, his reputation. But worse than that, he lost his faith in love, in trust, in basic human decency. You didn't just steal his money, you stole his soul. Tears were streaming down my face, but Elena Martinez showed no mercy. He moved in with me and the girls, not because we were getting back together, but because he had nowhere else to go. And I watched him die a little bit more every day. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't work. He kept saying it was his fault, that he should have seen through your lies. "It wasn't his fault," I whispered. "No, it wasn't. It was yours. Every bit of it was yours. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're sorry? My daughters found their father in the garage with the car running. They were 8 years old, and they found their father dead because of what you did to him, and you're sorry?" I was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that shook my entire body. I didn't know. I never looked back. I didn't know what happened. Of course you didn't know, because you didn't care. You got what you wanted and moved on to your next victim. I stopped. After David, after your husband, I stopped. I never did it again. Really? Then what do you call this? She gestured around my office. What do you call your marriage to David Whitmore? Another con? No, it's not a con. I love David. You loved my husband too, didn't you? At least that's what you told him. Every day for 6 months you told him you loved him. This is different, is it? You're still lying. You're still taking money from a man who trusts you. You're still destroying lives. I'm not going to leave David. I'm not going to take his money and disappear. No, you're just going to let him live a lie for the rest of his life. Let him love someone who doesn't exist. Elena reached into her purse again and pulled out another envelope. I have copies of everything. Police reports, financial records, photographs. Everything I need to prove what you did to my husband. What do you want? I whispered. Justice. I want you to pay for what you did. I'll give you money. I have money saved. I don't want your money. I want you to face the consequences of your actions. You want me to go to prison. I want you to tell the truth. To your husband, to the police, to everyone. I want you to admit what you are. I stared at her across my desk, this woman whose life I had destroyed, and realized that my worst nightmare was coming true. And if I don't, then I'll tell them myself, starting with your husband. When? Today. I'm going to his office after I leave here. My heart stopped. No, please don't do that. Why? Because it will ruin your perfect little life? Because it will hurt someone you claim to love? Because it will destroy him. Like you destroyed my husband? David is innocent in all this. He doesn't deserve to be hurt. Neither did my husband. Neither did our daughters. But that didn't stop you. I was desperate now, grasping at anything that might change her mind. Your daughters, what will this do to them? Having it all dredged up again? Having to relive their father's death? My daughters deserve to know that their father's killer is finally going to face justice. I didn't kill him, didn't you? Eleanor's voice was quiet but deadly. You took everything he had, everything he was, and left him with nothing but despair. What would you call that? I didn't have an answer. How could I argue with a woman whose husband was dead because of what I'd done? Please, I whispered, give me time. Let me tell David myself. How much time? A week. Just give me a week to figure out how to tell him. You've had 5 years to tell him. Why should I give you another week? Because if you tell him, he'll never hear it from me. He'll never know that I wanted to be honest with him, that I was trying to find the courage. Elena was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. You really love him, don't you? More than anything. Did you love my husband? The question caught me off guard. I cared about him, but you didn't love him. No, I didn't love him. What made David different? I thought about it, trying to find words for something I'd never fully understood myself. When I met David, I was planning to retire. I had enough money to disappear and start over somewhere else. But there was something about him. He was so genuine, so kind. He made me want to be a better person. And yet you still lied to him, because I was afraid. I was afraid that if he knew who I really was, he wouldn't love me anymore. He wouldn't. I know. Elena was quiet again, and I could see her struggling with something. 24 hours, she said finally. What? I'll give you 24 hours to tell him yourself. If you don't, I will. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because even my husband deserves to have his killer show some remorse before facing justice. She stood up to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I believe you when you say you love him. But love built on lies isn't really love at all, is it? It's just another kind of theft. After she left, I sat in my office for hours, staring at the photographs she'd left behind. Pictures of David Martinez, alive, happy, hopeful. Pictures of his daughters at his funeral, their small faces twisted with grief and confusion. I thought about calling David, asking him to come home early so we could talk. But what would I say? How do you tell someone you love that you're responsible for another person's death? Instead, I went home and cooked his favorite dinner. I opened a bottle of wine and set the table with our good china. If this was going to be our last night together, I wanted it to be perfect. David came home at his usual time, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. "Something smells amazing," he said, kissing me hello. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. I just wanted to do something special for you." We had dinner and talked about our days, carefully avoiding any mention of Elena Martinez or the bomb that was about to explode our life together. David was relaxed and happy, telling me about a case he'd won and plans he was making for our upcoming anniversary. After dinner, we cuddled on the couch and watched a movie. David fell asleep with his head in my lap, and I sat there stroking his hair and memorizing the feel of him against me. This was love, I realized. Not the passion and excitement of new romance, but this quiet contentment, this sense of safety and belonging. This was what I'd been searching for my entire life without even knowing it, and I was about to lose it all. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to David, listening to him breathe and trying to find the words to tell him the truth. How do you explain to someone that their entire life with you has been built on a lie? How do you tell them that the person they fell in love with doesn't really exist? Morning came too soon. David got up and showered and dressed for work, just like always. I made him coffee and breakfast, just like always. We kissed goodbye, just like always. "I love you," he said, just like always. "I'd love you too," I replied, knowing it might be the last time. I called in sick to work and spent the day trying to figure out what to say. I wrote dozens of letters, practiced speeches in the mirror, searched online for advice on how to confess terrible secrets to the person you love. Nothing helped. There was no good way to say what I needed to say. At 5 o'clock, I heard David's car in the driveway. My heart started pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This was it. The moment that would either destroy us or somehow miraculously save us. David walked through the door, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. His face was pale, his expression grim. He set his briefcase down carefully and looked at me with eyes I'd never seen before. "We need to talk," he said. My blood turned to ice. "About what?" "Sit down, Sarah." I sat down on the couch, my hands shaking. David remained standing, and I realized he was holding something behind his back. "A woman came to see me today," he said quietly. "Elena Martinez. She told me some very interesting things about my wife." The world tilted on its axis. Elena hadn't waited 24 hours. She'd gone to David's office immediately after leaving mine. "David, I can explain." "Can you?" He brought his hands forward and I saw he was holding a thick file folder. "Can you explain this?" He opened the folder and began pulling out photographs, documents, police reports. Evidence of every crime I'd ever committed, every life I'd ruined. "Can you explain how my wife, Sarah Whitmore, former marketing executive from Denver, is actually Sofia Rodriguez, a career criminal who destroyed multiple lives? David, please, can you explain how the woman I've loved for 5 years is responsible for a man's death?" I started crying then, ugly sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. "I was going to tell you," I whispered, "tonight. I was going to tell you everything. Were you? Or were you going to tell me another lie?" "The truth. I was going to tell you the truth." David was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence spread across our coffee table. "Mrs. Martinez told me everything," he said finally, "about her husband, about the others, about what you did to them. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." "Sorry for what? Sorry you got caught? Sorry you couldn't keep lying to me forever? Sorry for hurting people? Sorry for lying to you? Sorry for everything? Are you sorry for David Martinez? Are you sorry he's dead?" "Yes. God, yes, I think about him every day now." "Every day now? What about before? What about for the past 5 years when you were living your perfect little life built on his blood money?" I didn't answer because I couldn't. He was right. I hadn't thought about David Martinez for 5 years. I'd pushed him and the others out of my mind and convinced myself that I deserved the happiness I'd found with David. "Who are you?" David asked, and his voice broke on the question. "Who is the woman I married?" "I'm the woman who loves you more than anything in the world." "No, you're not. The woman I married doesn't exist. She never existed. She does exist. I became her. For you, I became her. You became a lie. Our entire relationship is built on lies. Not everything. Not my love for you. That's real. How can I believe anything you say? How can I trust a single word that comes out of your mouth?" I didn't have an answer for that either. David walked to the window and stood there with his back to me, his shoulders rigid with tension. "Mrs. Martinez wants to press charges," he said quietly. "I know. She's already been to the police. They're reopening the investigation into her husband's case. I know. They'll probably arrest you soon. I know." David turned around and I saw that he was crying too. "5 years," he whispered. "5 years of my life. 5 years of loving someone who doesn't exist. I exist, David. I became real because of you. You're a criminal, a con artist, a killer. I'm your wife. No, you're not. My wife died the moment Mrs. Martinez walked into my office. I don't know who you are." We stared at each other across the room, across the chasm that now separated us, and I realized it was over. There would be no forgiveness, no second chances, no fairy tale ending where love conquered all. David walked upstairs and I heard him moving around in our bedroom. When he came back down, he was carrying a suitcase. "Where are you going?" I asked. "I don't know. A hotel maybe. I can't be here right now." "David, please, don't leave. We can work through this." "Work through this?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sarah, you killed a man. You destroyed multiple lives. You've been lying to me every single day for 5 years. What exactly do you think we can work through? We can work through the lies. We can build something real going forward." "There is no going forward, not for us. You said you loved me no matter what." "I said I love Sarah Whitmore, but Sarah Whitmore doesn't exist." He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to me. "For what it's worth, I believe you when you say you love me, but it doesn't matter. Love isn't enough to overcome what you've done. Where does this leave us? There is no us. There never was. Just you and your con." "David, please. I'll be back tomorrow when you're at work to get the rest of my things. I'll have divorce papers drawn up by the end of the week." The word hit me like a physical blow. Divorce. The end of everything I'd ever wanted. What about the house? Our life together? Our life together was a lie. As for the house, he shrugged. "I guess that depends on whether you end up in prison." He opened the front door, then paused one more time. "I hope they arrest you," he said quietly. "I hope you go to prison for a very long time. Not because I hate you, but because it's what you deserve. And maybe, if you're very lucky, someday you'll become the person you pretended to be with me." And then he was gone, taking my heart and my future with him. I sat in our empty house, my empty house now, and realized that Elena Martinez had been right. Love built on lies wasn't really love at all. It was just another kind of theft. And now, finally, it was time to pay for what I'd stolen. The next morning, the police came. They were professional and polite as they read me my rights and led me away in handcuffs. The neighbors watched from their windows as I was put into the back of a patrol car, and I wondered what David would tell them about why his wife had been arrested. As we drove away from the house David and I had shared, I thought about all the choices that had led me to this moment. The choice to become a con artist, the choice to hurt innocent people, the choice to build a life on lies. But mostly, I thought about David Martinez and his 2 little girls, and how different all our lives might have been if I'd made better choices. It was too late for regret, too late for apologies, too late for anything except facing the consequences of what I'd done. Elena Martinez had gotten her justice, David would get his divorce, and I would get exactly what I deserved.